Senator Nelson.
Madam President, are we on third reading?
We did third reading.
Thank you. Members, this has been an interesting discussion, and I just wanted to add a few comments to today's discussion, particularly while we so need the federal conformity piece. I'm disappointed that it does not include full federal conformity, but am pleased to see that we will be providing some relief to Minnesota taxpayers, although it's unfortunate it comes after they have filed their taxes. But there's one piece in this bill that has caused great concern, and we've discussed it in length today. And that has to do with the paid family leave bill. Now, I understand the need for paid family leave. Employers understand that need. They know that their employees are able to perform better when their families are well taken care of. And that is why Minnesota workers already receive compensation in some form for over 75% of the leaves that this new proposal would cover. Over 75%. Already covered in some form. And because that family leave is so important, I have been a strong supporter of expanding family leave proposals and did so in 2013. But however well intended this bill is before us today, it is flawed in its implementation. This bill today before us that we have been discussing, the paid family leave bill, would impose a new tax on Minnesota employees, all of them, and employers if they work in settings over 21 employees. Most Minnesota employees and employers will get a new tax. That's what they're going to see on their wage statement if this bill were to pass. A new tax for something that 75% of them are already receiving. This proposal calls for over 100, get that correct, members, 100 new full-time government employees to administer this program. This program calls for $13 million for administrative setup in year one. And you might think that's pretty bad. And it is a high number. I think that money could be better spent in other ways. However, that's not the end, members. The fiscal note shows that costs to administer this new program would exceed over 7% of projected benefits. 7%. We know that that is a high administrative cost. So members, I would say, well, this is a needed proposal which may very well, it sounds like, is being quite well covered in the private sector. We have a one-size proposal here for a problem that is largely being covered. I would also say that this is very premature. We have talked about the problems with this bill. In the tax committee yesterday, we questioned these items. I believe that Senator Bach said that this is not a perfect bill. And of course it's not a perfect bill. It's not even ready for prime time. And members, our constituents do not expect us to pass bills that have knowing and glaring problems. And finally, members, my constituents, they are much more interested in having us get MNsure fixed. They would much rather have Minnesota state government focus on the insurance exchanges that this body set up several years ago. So while there are some good things in this bill, like the tax conformity piece, I'm confident that we will see tax conformity again as we get bills from the other house. But I'm very disappointed that we have, I think, a very premature proposal before us today for an issue that is very important. I hope we can do better in the future.
Senator Hayden.
Well, thank you, Madam President, and members. I appreciate, first of all, I want to thank Senator Scoy and Senator Ress for their work on this bill, at least thus far, and I want to give a special thank you to Senator Sieben and the great work that she has done in identifying this issue of paid family leave. I was listening intently, especially just now, to Senator Nelson that said that, is this bill ready for prime time? Well, members, we have heard our state's demographer. We've heard over and over here that says that Minnesota's getting grayer. It's also getting browner, but in this case, it's getting grayer. I don't like to, I heard Senator Hoffman had a bill not long ago that talked about the silver tsunami. It's not my choice of words, it was his. Senator Johnson had a bill today that talked about this issue of what happens in long-term care facilities. Senator Eakin and others have talked about this issue of our concern about how we treat our constituents, Minnesotans, as they age. We also know that part of our growth is for people to have children. So right now is the time to think about this issue. Overwhelmingly, I believe Minnesotans want some sort of relief if they have to take care of a loved one, if they have a child, no matter if they're a man or a woman. They want that level of relief, that assurance that they could take time off and that they could still get some sort of compensation, that they don't have to leave their job in order to make sure that they can take care of each other. Members, I think about, harking back to the days when my grandmother was still alive. She preceded to her, my grandfather had a stroke, and she suffered from COPD, which is a form of emphysema or asthma. Emphysema, asthma, or some sort of pulmonary issue. And when she was diagnosed, they gave her 5 years to live. She went on to live 15 more years. And one of the reasons I believe is that my father and myself, who were the two people that she depended on with her health care, I had a sympathetic employer that would let me at least once a week or more take time off to take her to the doctor to make sure that her needs were met, and my father was able to do the same. So my grandmother lived, I think, a much better and a longer life, and we cherished every single minute that we had with her until her ultimate death. And that was because we had the opportunity to do so. There are so many Minnesotans that don't have the opportunity to do it. And members, I'll leave you with another quick story because it has to deal with a bill that I had in ensuring that all Minnesotans, no matter how they got here or what their status was, got some health care. We had a testifier that was on the record here in this body, in the room right next to us, who said that the only time that she was able to get health care was when she was pregnant. It was the only time she was able to do so. But the significant thing about this was because she did not have paid leave, she said on the record that she had her baby on Thursday and Friday, and she was back to work on Monday. And she had a child, and she was pregnant at the time, and she said she thought the same thing that was going to happen. And members, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. This opportunity for us to be able to extend this benefit is right for Minnesotans. It's right for our families. It's right for our grandmothers, our grandfathers, our aunties. It's right for our children if they get sick, and the children that we still yet to have, and our grandchildren. So I would hope that you would think about this. Do we need to continue to work on the bill? Do we continue to look at it? But I would say that my constituents would find this to be a very, very important issue, and that I would contrast what my friends on the other side of the aisle would say, and that this bill is more than ready in prime time.
Gazelka, Senator Gazelka.
Well, Madam President, members, the reason why I'm opposing this bill is twofold. And one is how we've crafted the family medical leave. It would be nice to say that it works, but as we tried to point out, the numbers are flawed everywhere you turn. And we can't get very far away from MNsure and not say that if we don't get the numbers right, we have big problems. Does anybody remember the promises of lower health care costs, that you could keep your doctor, that you could keep your plan? None of that happened. And so here we are doing the same thing again, choosing not to look at the numbers. Who would not want to provide 12 weeks of paid leave? Who would not want to provide that for a family, for a worker, unless it created harm to the individual that was providing that benefit? And that's what we are concerned about. Employees, of course, are looking for the best combination of high wages, flexible benefits, and time off. employers need to craft their plan that would reach out and get the best employees, finding the best combination of those things. But this is a one-size-fits-all plan that government is going to say to business, this is how we want you to do it, and we don't think that's working. Nowhere in the country, nowhere does any state require more than 6 weeks, and yet we're saying 12 weeks. We're not just saying 7 or 8 weeks, we're doubling the greatest amount out there. And what if we're getting this wrong? What if the numbers are wrong like what we're saying? So it's not going to be what the rate is that we say. Like I said, it could be as much as 15 times more. And we need to listen to the people that are out there telling us the consequences that are coming. We've heard from our local governments and nonprofits saying, please don't do this. This will create hardship for us. Our local school districts are saying, please don't do this. This will cause hardships. Our local small businesses, for sure in rural and I'm sure everywhere, are saying, please don't do this. This will cause harm. So, Madam President, members, the numbers don't add up. Do not forget MNsure math because it left us in a very difficult place. So what is the solution? Well, here's the solution. Rather than this path we're going on, how about we as legislators and the governor seriously sit down with the business community, large and small, and say, how do we craft something that works better? Rather than us as government saying, this is what you're going to do, how about we ask them to come to the table? I think that works a lot better. I think honey works a lot better than vinegar, and this is vinegar. And Madam President, the last thing that I'd say about this overall bill is as a result of what we're doing today, mostly spending more money, all we've left available for tax relief is $159 million for that other bill that we passed last year, which gave relief for veterans and seniors and property tax relief to a number of groups and a number of things. All we've left is $159 million. 2 years ago, we had a $2 billion surplus, and you can't tell me that we're going to spend all of that and provide no tax relief. This is a no vote.
Is there any more discussion? Senator Ortman.
Thank you. My dear fellow senators, are you not aware of how many Minnesota families are already living paycheck to paycheck? Are you not aware of the struggles of all Minnesota families? And yet today you want to impose another payroll tax on hardworking Minnesotans. Another reduction from their hard-earned income. Why are you raising taxes again? We have a state surplus because we have already overtaxed Minnesotans. You promised tax relief, but this bill does nothing but raise taxes by $300 million every year, $600 million every biennium, which equates to a 15% increase in the size of government in this one bill. How can you expect Minnesota families to pay more and more for the growth of government when they don't have enough to make ends meet in their own families? This payroll tax will take money out of the pockets of 16-year-olds with their first part-time job. Folks earning just our minimum wage. This tax bill will take payroll tax deductions out of those that are underemployed, out of the seniors in Minnesota who are working part-time to make ends meet, to pay for their prescription drugs, to pay their bills. Members, this tax will hit hard the student that is working full-time to try and save money to go to college to have a better life. This tax will hit hard our new Americans that have just gotten their very first job and are trying to get their feet settled on the ground and become good citizens in our communities. You're making it harder for Minnesotans to make ends meet, making it harder to make it to the next paycheck. Have you not ever been in the situation where you had just $5 left in your pocket waiting for the next paycheck? Have you not ever been in that situation where you can only put $9 into the gas tank in order to get to work, hoping that you can earn another day's pay? If you haven't been in that situation, members, dear fellow senators, then you are out of touch with the majority of Minnesotans. In fact, most Americans, by all reports, cannot afford $400 to face a family emergency, whether it's a car repair, a doctor's bill, $400. Let's be real about the impact. You can say it's small. It is not small according to these family budgets. If you look at your $45 per person, and you look at the family impact, that's $90. And I just want to talk about how much $90 means to a Minnesota family. You may think this is just a little thing, but I'm going to give you some good examples. Just think of the cost of lunches for just one kid. Just think of the cost of the electricity payment for 1 month, $90 on average. Just think of the co-pays for your kids to go to the doctor, for your kids to go to the dentist, for the prescriptions for your parents. Just think about these families that can't save for college. This is their college savings plan you're taking from their paychecks, week after week after week. There will be a cost to this, and it will be paid for by Minnesota families less able to make their ends meet and less able to reach their goals. Members, please do not write this off as a minimal little thing. It is not. It is a tax increase. There are so many reasons to vote no on this bill. That is the predominant one. But there is the other of the internet sales tax, the secret tax hike in this bill. Be very clear. Minnesotans will be hurt by this. $300 million every year to grow government by 15%. It is a disgrace to put this bill out in a year when you have promised tax relief to Minnesota families.
Senator Senjum.
Madam President, thank you very much. I want to speak just briefly to something that is not in the bill, and that is Social Security taxation. It is not in the bill, and we didn't offer an amendment today, Madam President, because we do know that it's in conference committee, and given that, we want it to have certainly a fair chance there. But I don't think this day and this debate can go by without some mention of Social Security taxation. And I don't think, at least as I have traveled my travels over the course of the last several months and since last session, it is, I think, for me at least, one of the most frequently cited issues that people bring, if you will, before state government. And that is the taxation of Social Security. We've got it in Minnesota, Madam President, 38 states do not. We are one of 6 states in the United States of America that tax Social Security. There are 7 others that have other kinds of exemptions, don't tax it as much, but we're still 6 states. There are 6 states in the country that do not tax Social Security, or that do tax Social Security, and we're one of them. And so, as we have this growing, aging population, and we know that's true from the demographics and so on that we hear, I won't go through all the statistics, but it's real. We've got a lot of people in Minnesota paying a lot of Social Security tax, a tax that was put into effect some years ago, and frankly, a tax on a benefit. So, Senator Skoye, I think if you were to get at least one other message today out of the Republican caucus, it would be, as you go back into conference committee, give strong consideration to Social Security taxation and the gradual elimination of it. Iowa in 2006 set forth on this path over an 8-year period. They do not tax Social Security anymore. We can start on that path. Representative Davids in the House has it in his bill. I think it's a 7-year plan. Make it a 7-year plan, make it a 10-year plan, make it a 20-year plan. I don't think any of us care except that we start the journey. We need to do this, I think, for our growing senior population who have lots and lots of expenses. The world isn't getting any cheaper, and that need that sort of relief. Madam President, thank you very much.
Senator Han.
Thank you, Madam President, and members, and for people who may be watching this debate at home. And I just very briefly want to make sure that we don't forget the context that we are acting here today. We came here last year, we passed a pretty good budget increase, about 5%. We have a $42 billion budget, but there were a couple of things that we didn't do. And we all talked about it in the interim. We didn't get a tax bill done, and we didn't get a comprehensive transportation bill completed. And as a result of the negotiations at the end of the session, we left what turned out to be $900 million of money unspent. And I think the understanding by everybody in this room and everybody out who may be watching this is that money was reserved to do two things: make sure we could fund transportation and make sure we could do significant tax relief for the people of this state. And this now today is kind of the last piece of the puzzle. We've kind of done everything. We've got the whole $900 million spent. And what did we do with it? What did we do with it? A couple of weeks ago, we had a big supplemental budget bill that ended up taking about $500 or $600 million of that from the surplus and another $400 million from the tails, another over $1 billion of spending. Not a dime went to transportation. Not one dime of that supplemental budget that was passed by the majority of the Democrats in this body went to transportation. On our side, we offered to take $463 million of that surplus and say, let's spend it on road and bridge construction and maintenance. And the majority of Democrats said, no, we're not going to do that. So we didn't. So we passed that supplemental spending bill with no transportation money at all. Now we've got a tax bill. And the tax bill originally, when the targets came out, the majority said we're going to spend $300 million on tax relief. And now we see in the bill there isn't any tax relief. There are some taxes and credits and so forth. That's fine. But instead of tax relief, we are seeing additional taxes being put on the people of this state, as was mentioned by others in this body. And not just on people, but on the businesses that operate in this state, trying to find a competitive advantage. And we've even heard testimony here or speeches here that said that businesses should not seek to have competitive advantage on things like benefits, for example. So how much money is left over to do tax relief? I think Senator Gazelka mentioned $159 million. So we have a $900 million surplus. None of it's going to transportation, and $159 million left over to go to the conference committee to do tax relief. And where is that Social Security tax that Senator Senchum talked about, or the relief on pensions, taxes on pensions for the military in this state? Where is that? Nowhere to be found. And is there money left now in the conference committee to address those two vital things? It's hard to see how it's going to happen. Hard to see how it's going to happen. So members and people who are watching this, this is a clue about what we're doing here. We are not living up to the promises that we made to the people of this state. We're not doing the things we said are the priority. We're taking every dime that we have our hands on and we're spending it, not on the priorities that we said we had, but on other things. And we're adding to the tax burden of the state. This is the DFL plan. This is the Democrat plan for the state of Minnesota. Raise as many taxes as you can and spend all that money, but don't spend it on the priorities. In fact, I guess what we're waiting for, we haven't seen much of the Transportation Committee meeting, but what the rumor is and what we saw last year was there's a significant gas tax increase coming down the pike as well, on top of everything else we've done. You know, there used to be a thing that Democrats were considered the tax and spend party. I don't see how you can look at what we've done so far this year and not come to the conclusion that's exactly what it is. Taxing and spending, but with very little effect. We still have major problems in MNsure. That system is failing, and there's not been a single thing done this session to try to address some of those failures. So members, this is unfortunate that we are here today. And I would urge a red vote. I would urge that we would go back to the drawing board and look at how we can bring meaningful tax relief, tax reform to the people of this state instead of adding to the burden. So members, I urge a red vote.
Senator Franson.
Thank you, Madam President. I urge members to consider supporting this bill. I would like to speak to a couple items on it, particularly the paid family leave, which I am a co-author of, and I struggled with that because I certainly, you know, when you introduce a bill and it's not in its perfect form, you massage it and work it around with stakeholders. The problem here is, members, and Senator Gazelka, to your point, I received a lot of emails today to oppose the bill, particularly this provision, from the business community, but I did not receive any ways to fix it. or to make it workable. And the characterization that this is just another tax on businesses is not the full picture, because it's a program similar to the unemployment insurance system program we have in Minnesota already, where not only the employer but also the employee works to fund that system, and the system is mutually beneficial. It not only helps businesses because it provides for an employee base that is healthy and stress-free, or at least a little bit more stress-free, because they'll have time that they don't have to stress about taking care of their newborn child or taking care of their family member who is ill. We didn't talk about the benefits in detail, and I want to mention some of those. And I also want to start by also talking about, the United States is on the very end of this debate nationwide. We're the one on the list of developed countries. We are last. I think next to New Papua Guinea, which is not really where we want to be when it comes to a benefit that really helps families and puts families first instead of. I think the notion we've heard today, tax relief first, families second. At least that's how I perceive the discussion. Great Britain, for example, that nation not too far from us, all women are guaranteed 52 weeks of maternity leave, 39 of them paid, 2 of them mandatory. So we are not even close to what the other part of the world has already done for families. And you've taken trips abroad and talked to folks, and I've talked to people abroad, and when I'm taking trips, trying to figure out what the benefits are in Sweden versus England and so forth. And we're really behind, members, in our country when it comes to paid family leave. And if you look around the room today in the chamber, there's not a lot of women here, not a lot of young women, not a lot of women who just had a baby. I think maybe Senator Sieben and myself were the last ones, but I know that a few others have been here and served and come back to work a couple of days, a couple of weeks after delivering their child. A lot of times because that was their own personal decision. But certainly, I can speak as a small business owner. I was emailing the day after my baby was born, and I shouldn't have been doing that, but I didn't have a paid or unpaid leave. It was my decision to do that. But members, not a lot of people in our state have that decision. A lot of people have to go back to work, and they should be spending time with their child. This is about families. This is about the benefits of having that bonding between mom, dad, and new baby. Some of those benefits have been recognized by studies, and I'm not going to bore you with data. I'm just going to mention one, CDC, which is the U.S., you all know, Centers for Disease Control. There's others by Harvard and so forth, but all come to the same conclusion. Better health, less postpartum depression, lower newborn and infant mortality, higher rates of breastfeeding, childhood immunization, and certainly, I'm sure, less stress, less divorce, and other benefits that we probably can't quantify here. Members, don't dismiss the benefits of this policy. And the arguments that this bill is not ready for prime time, well, we're ready to have that discussion. And I don't think any member here offered any amendments to make this better and more, in line with what we believe is what we're here for. We're here for Minnesota families to make sure businesses thrive, but we can't leave behind people who don't have the ability to really bond with their child, to really take care of their family member. We can all probably relate to this. My grandmother had a stroke a few years ago. She's been in bed ever since. My mother had to take care of her along with other family members. None of them had a paid leave. They're doing this because they're family. And it's really stressful. And it really has even bigger health consequences on the caregivers. So the benefits will be there. So let's not just brush off this argument and say it's just about raising taxes to businesses. This is about Minnesota families, and it's important. Yes, it's about women, but it's also about men. It's also about that child who's going to benefit long term. And we can go on and on about those benefits, but let's not just leave the argument that this is just a new tax. We're all in this together, and we have to figure a way how Minnesota and the rest of our country steps up and it's not the last one on the list when it comes to paid family leave. It's about time that we start talking about it, and I urge members to be more engaged on this debate, not just oppose it. Thank you.
Madam President.
Senator Han.
Thank you. Madam President, I didn't intend to get up again, but I felt a need to respond. We just heard from Senator Franson a characterization of a major provision in this bill, the family medical leave portion, as something that businesses support or ought to support. And how can we say that when we all have on your desk a letter from the Minnesota Chamber talking about why this is not good for Minnesota business? And how can a senator stand up and say, despite that, well, I guess maybe the business community doesn't understand its business? That's the only conclusion I can reach. There are things that, and I don't know, maybe Senator Franson, are they just not telling the truth when they talk about the things in this letter? Is it not true? Are you refuting what their statements are, or are you saying that somehow those things are not legitimate criticisms of this particular bill? The fact is that businesses need flexibility. They do need to compete on offering benefits, and they do that right now. And I think one of our members pointed out that a great majority of people, employees in this state, already receive benefits that are covered by this bill, but they are received in a competitive way that doesn't break the bank, so to speak. It doesn't kill the goose that's laying the golden egg. It doesn't put undue burdens on the business climate of this state. And so, members, vote how you think you wish on this bill, but don't be misled into thinking that this is a good thing for business to impose this tax on employers and employees, eliminate the opportunity for flexibility, for tailoring benefits to fit the employee base that every business has. This bill would kill that. This bill would kill that. I guess I'm just reminded of what people have said in the past. You can't be pro-egg and anti-chicken. And we're being anti-chicken with this bill.
Senator Skoye.
Thank you, Madam President. And I first have to thank both tax committees for the work that they've done the last couple of years. They really are good committees with good discussion, good dialogue, always respectful, and always trying to move the ball forward with regard to the work that that committee is doing. I particularly have to thank my partner, Senator Rest, for her work, and Senator Ortman and Senator Thompson, the leads, for their additions to the discussion. It's always been very, very good. I need to thank Senate Counsel, Ms. Pollack, Mr. Eric Hu Sylvia, Mr. Paulson, Dr. McQuay. She's leaving us. Everybody who has had the opportunity to look through the spreadsheets through the last few years, say thank you to Shelby for her great work. She's going on to another great profession, but we sure wish her well. I'd like to thank the committee staff, Steve Peterson, Donovan Hurd, Diane Patnode, my LA, Krista and Ryan, Brenda Schaefer-Pellinen, and Chris McCall. Without these folks, the tax committee wouldn't operate as well as it does, and we owe them all a thanks. I do have to respond just a little bit to what the folks that are watching this, the confusion that they must feel. Because we have one side saying there's nothing but tax cuts and no tax relief, and we have the other side saying, no, that isn't true, and where's the tax relief? And one side says that the spreadsheets don't say this, and one side that they do. And I understand that that's confusing, but I have to ask for those that are wondering about the relief in this bill. Conformity has always been viewed as tax relief. It's reducing the impact of taxes on Minnesotans. The working family credit clearly is tax relief for working Minnesotans. So there is tax relief in this bill. And don't be misled by those that say it's not there, because it's in the bill and it's on the spreadsheet. The spreadsheets are prepared by nonpartisan staff and they're accurate. So when we talk about the tax relief and the working family credit, the emphasis really is about the impacts on Minnesota families and how we can move this state forward to try to do better for us. And the list is quite long of benefits that are going to be proposed for Minnesota's families, in addition to the working family credit and conformity. Younger families with large amounts of student debt are going to be benefited if this credit becomes law. Minnesota is achieving the distinction of one of the highest states in the nation for students to graduate with debt. We need to be attacking that at multiple levels. Senator Bonoff has made good efforts with the state grant program, and here we're going to make another effort in the tax bill. Parents who have stillbirth children will be benefited by this bill. Families that are trying to get their citizenship will be benefited here. It's extremely expensive to apply for citizenship. It's one of the things that all people who reside here strive for, and the cost shouldn't be a determining factor. We're hopeful with the good idea that Senator Ortman and Senator Herr had to have increased employment in census tracts with extremely high unemployment rates. And many of these other smaller provisions are targeted at Minnesota families and their help. And of course, Senator Siebens' good work on the paid family leave. We know that impacts all Minnesota families at some point. Their parents get old and need help, or they have children. So I would ask for a green vote today and appreciate the good discussion.
Is there any other discussion? Then the Secretary will take the roll on House File 3931. All members having voted, Secretary will close the roll. There being 37 ayes and 30 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to.